All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Macro Perspective. But before we dive into today's guest, go ahead and drop a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, we would enjoy a follow there as well. Slowly growing as organically as possible. And we definitely also appreciate any shares. And we definitely feel like today's episode is going to be super shareable as we have Parker Sloan on to talk a little bit more about holistic women's health. Um, and that's kind of like my general synopsis of it. But Parker, I'll let you take the stage here and kind of introduce yourself and give a little more background because that's probably a not so appropriate rudimentary understanding of what you actually do.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really great way. If you had to put it in like 3 words, holistic women's health is definitely the way to go. I would say that I cater to both genders for sure. A lot of the root of the things that I teach are just general health and wellness, right? And a little bit more than generalized health and wellness. There's a really holistic aspect to everything that I do. So I come from a background of being a yoga instructor. I've had my certification since 2019. I've done a lot of awesome stuff in Miami, my home base, with that. And I also am a certified health coach. I'm also getting my master's in integrative nutrition right now, though, to really get a super deep dive perspective on the human body, and nutrition is really where my entire health journey started. So that's another really cool thing that's going on. But when it comes to the women's health, I am certified in something called Applied Female Neuropsychophysiology, which is just the coolest thing ever to say, which deals essentially with teaching women the different phases of their hormonal cycle and how that can affect so many different facets of their life, like the way that they eat, the way that they move, the way that we feel energized or not energized, motivated, not motivated, up or down. And it really is all dependent on our hormones. And, a lot of women and men kind of generalize a woman's cycle to just when she's bleeding, but it really is the entire month. And it's a really empowering thing to learn when you realize that so much of it is governed by something that's actually happening physiologically versus just like these random changes in every way that we feel every single week. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
with your holistic certification, what's the name of the organization out of curiosity? Was
Yeah,
it the
I did
one
it
you,
with
yeah,
IIN, which is,
IIN?
I think,
Okay.
one that a lot of people know, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition.
Okay, sweet. Because I didn't see that on our dossier for you, so I was kind of curious. Selfishly, I was like, I actually
Oh,
have
yeah,
a,
totally.
a health practitioner certification, IHP, level 1 and level 2. Actually, just got the nice little one I could pull out and show everybody.
Hmm.
But same thing. It's like these, again, like I was always very rooted in the macro coaching in the beginning. And I had a mentor saying, bro, one day you will do more than be a macro coach. Trust me. I was like, nah, fam. Like, that's not going to happen. It's like, I'm just
Uh-huh.
here. I'm 22 at the time, so like, I don't know what I don't know. It's like, I'm just here to coach people. And yeah, like now it's evolved into like so much more. So that's what made us super excited when Andres was like, hey, you should definitely have my girlfriend on because it dives into a sector and population that obviously Seamus and I are not female, right? We weren't born with that anatomy. So coaching that at times can definitely be, no, I wouldn't say a struggle, but it's like hard to be like, hey, like anecdotally, I've dealt with my cycle and like you probably want to like
Yeah.
register your temperature readings and then learn about your ovulation cycle. And then they're hearing it from a guy for the first time. And they're like, how do you know more
Yeah.
about my cycle than I do?
Totally, totally. And you bring up a really good point because even I think women who try to coach women, if we're coming from it just from a perspective of what we've learned in textbooks or coachings, for the general population, there's really not a lot of science that has been done on women. So the grand majority of scientific research that's been done, for fitness, for health, for nutrition, has all been done on men. And that's pretty much still the case today. It is, we're breaking out of that, and there are, a lot of examples now where we can see women are being involved. But it's just not applicable in the same way
Yeah.
as it is for men. So
Oh yeah.
I,
The,
I,
it's
I have a
a very
question.
intuitive process that has to go
Yeah.
into coaching.
I have a question for this though, because this is all like very deep dive, right? Like your background, holistic. Obviously, you have the instructor. I mean, all this stuff. what made you get interested in this? Like, what steered your life towards this way?
Okay. I'll answer that through the lens of just becoming healthy in general and getting into the holistic health world, and then more so the female perspective. But I was not a healthy kid. Like, I had high cholesterol in fourth grade. I was a little on the chubby side. There's nothing wrong with that. I just told myself I had baby fat for a little too long. My parents had to put me in speed swimming so that I could like lose weight. Like, so interesting to say now and reflect on. But that was the situation. Like, definitely ate a lot of junk food, but it's because I was super picky. So like, I didn't understand the concept of food being a source of fuel, of being a source of medicine, really. And it wasn't until I think it was eighth grade that my dad was making a green smoothie. That's like the hallmark event. He was making a green smoothie when like that was so trendy, and it still is. Like, he was throwing spinach and greens and all this stuff in a blender, and I was like, that's disgusting. Why are you doing that? And he was like, well, I got my blood work back. My cholesterol was high, and I'm doing this to help my blood. And that was the light bulb moment for me where I realized that food truly is medicine. I didn't understand the concept that food could literally change your blood for the better. Food could change your health for the better. And from there, I just started looking up like different foods that could help your eyes or help your skin. And it was so cool to me. And I didn't necessarily study it for a bit. I was in high school at the time, or I was going to high school at the time. And I really just changed my lifestyle. So it was a complete 180. Like, I started eating salads. I didn't eat a salad until I was like in middle school. It just was disgusting to me. And then these foods just started to taste good because I knew how good they were for me. So that was a really cool thing to see. Like, I was like, wheatgrass actually tastes good because it does all these things for me, even though in reality, like, it doesn't taste good to anyone. Um, so that's like how profound of an effect it had for me. Um, and I was just like that all throughout high school into college. And in high school, I randomly got invited to a yoga class. So like, this will all tie in with the yoga too. And I had never thought of doing yoga. I had only been going to the gym, and I was athletic, like I was in sports. And when I was invited to this yoga class by my godmother, who I call my fairy godmother, like, she's been a catalyst for so many great things in my life. Um, I realized that yoga was so much more than just exercise. Like, I went into the class excited to get lean and get long and get flexible, but it was really like, oh, this is something so much more divine than just movement. And from there, I got hooked to that. A couple years later, I got my certification, which was great. I was still in college at the time, and then the pandemic hit like a year after that, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with anything. I was still in school at the time, and I knew that the degree I was getting wasn't necessarily what I wanted to get into. I actually studied dietetics for a semester when I was at school. I went to Florida State University, and which, as a side note, yes, it's a party school. I was not really in the party side of things. I'll just make that a note. There's always an association when I tell people that I went there. But anyway, so I studied dietetics for a semester, decided I wasn't into it. I'm still not into it. I wouldn't want to be a dietitian. Not that there's anything wrong with it, I just wouldn't want to be. And I ended up graduating and then doing my IIN certification because I just really wanted to do something that involved working one-on-one with people or working with groups of people and helping them improve their health. I was kind of doing that through yoga, but I wanted more than that. And I knew that I had a lot of information and expertise in it, but I couldn't really just do that, I felt, without a certification. So I did that, went through the process. That was really cool. And then I don't know if Andres talked about this with you guys, but him and I actually were hired as health coaches, as wellness coaches, and trainers with this family that we moved to Uruguay with for like 7 months. So that was like kind of a pause on things that I would have been maybe getting into studying, and also like a really great opportunity to explore myself, my interests, and what I wanted to do. And then when we got out of that, I felt like I just had a lot of space to figure out how I wanted to re-implement my my passions. And out of nowhere, I was listening to a podcast. There was a woman who was a nutritionist, but she didn't study nutrition in her undergrad. She actually came from a journalistic background, and basically was like, I realized that I didn't want to do that. I wanted to study nutrition. I didn't realize that I could get my master's without having an undergrad and a scientific degree. So that was kind of like another huge light bulb moment for me, that I realized, oh, that's possible. And I woke up every single day for 3 weeks, literally thinking to myself, I need to get my master's in nutrition. Like, that's the next step. That's exactly what I need to do. So that's where I'm at now.
In
And I
school for
realized
your master's, or are you already done with it?
I'm 4 weeks into my master's. I'm certainly not done with it. I see that CMIS is gone.
Yeah, Seamus will be right back. There's some technical difficulties, like
Okay,
always on these virtual recordings,
got it.
but
Yeah. Do I just keep going? Or
yeah, we'll keep going. We'll keep going.
okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I realized that I didn't mention the whole part about the female side of things, and that's really something that along this whole journey played a really big role in my health. Something that was like ignored for a really long time, and I realized I really needed to address. So basically, when I was in my senior year of high school, I went on birth control. I had a boyfriend at the time, and then I was on it for maybe less than a year. When I got off of it, I lost my period for 2 years.
Oh
So,
shit.
yeah.
Wow.
So basically had lost it for a few months, called my doctor, and she was like, okay, well, because you haven't gotten it in a few months, just take the pill again to get it back. And I was like, that doesn't really make sense to me because I'm not getting it now. So, like, I don't really want to take a pill. I feel like that's going to mask things. And this was really before I understood anything about functional health, functional
Yeah.
medicine, the fact that we need to get to a root cause of things. Like, I had no concept of that at the time. I just knew that it didn't seem right, that, like, I naturally could not get it. So I was like, no, I'm not going to take the pill. I'm going to try to get it back. Then 8 months passed and I didn't get it. And then basically 2 years passed and I didn't get it. And I'm not here saying at all that birth control is bad. I don't even think it happened because of the birth control. I think it was a mix of things. I think I actually was vegan at the time, but probably not doing vegan the right way. I was plant-based, like I was eating whole foods, but I think it just turned into something where I wasn't eating enough. I was in college. I would skip meals unintentionally, like the whole thing, definitely overtraining, like not because I felt like I needed to go so hard. It was just like, it's what you do, right? You exercise and you just don't eat enough and you study and that's it. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I think that the pill for a while was giving me my period when in reality my body probably would have lost it way sooner. So I was
How lean were you, like in that college setting?
so I'm 5'3", and I think the lowest that I ever weighed myself was 104 pounds.
Oh yeah.
So I was
Yeah,
like
that.
way underweight, and I didn't
How much?
understand.
How
Sorry, what?
much training of like yoga were you doing? Like with
It
all
wasn't
that?
even
Or, like,
yoga. No. I was like
oh,
hitting the gym. Like I
Oh,
was.
oh, okay.
resistance training. Yeah.
The thing is, I wasn't training so crazy hard. I just think I literally wasn't eating enough, and I mean, being on a college campus, you walk a lot. Like it's so easy
Oh
to
yeah.
hit A steps. It's
Oh
just so
Yeah, you're
easy.
just under recovering. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I was totally under recovering, but I didn't have any concept of that at that time, right? So it was just kind of like I can eat really small, and it didn't come from a place of being restrictive either. Like I really didn't feel that. I think I just didn't know, and because I was vegan, I really wasn't getting a lot of the nutrients that I should have been. Nor did I have the nutritional knowledge to do a plant-based diet the right way, right? Like I
Yeah.
totally fell into the trap of being 100% plant-based but not getting the nutrients that I really needed to be smart about. Like you have to know your stuff if you're going to take on that
Yeah.
diet.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot. Like college is this time where you're doing so much and you can kind of forget. I mean, I've seen it
Totally.
time and time again coaching D1 athletes, like cases of reds all the time, right?
Yeah.
Before they called it like before they called it the female triad, but let's just call it like reds now.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, especially during like the summer. Girls are like just. I see this a lot with the female population, like that I used to coach. It's like
Mhm.
in the summer we were doing a lot of summer camp kind of stuff, or training hard because they got to do their assessments for the fall. They're doing too much of this. They're training too hard because they're nervous about the test, but
Yeah.
they're never recovering enough. So they're not doing the up and down. They're
No.
always kind of like living at the top, and they're kind of in the middle. So they can never go hard enough when we need them to go hard, and then they can never recover because they're anxious. So they're always doing something, and then next
Yeah.
thing you know, a girl is like, "Hey, pull them out the test. They're dehydrated. You got to get them off the field. They're dehydrated." Or, "Hey, there was a case of reds," and it's like hard enough for a woman. I know this because I just speak with the girls because I was with them, for the whole summer or years, and it's like they got a lot going on. They got to go travel home. They come into a foreign field and like they're not top girl anymore in their division. Oh, by the way, add in strength and conditioning to that. Like, hey, you
Yeah.
got to lift weights hard, and you still got your practice. Oh, by the way, keep a 3.0 GPA and
Yeah.
the whole social scene too. So yeah,
Yeah,
forgetting about it is
totally.
so you just was like, I just forgot, or it just kind of happened,
Yeah, totally. And no consideration for the cycle either, right? So like now
Yeah.
we know, especially like a resource that you guys would probably love is a woman named Stacey Sims, because she works directly
Yep.
with female athletes, and right,
Yeah.
she's amazing, and she'll like it's just baseline across the board. We know that females need to eat more carbohydrates in the week before your period because we're trying to build progesterone. If you don't
Yep.
do that, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel PMS, you're not going to feel great during your period. The cycle goes on and on and on. But it's hard to listen to those cues when we feel like we have to keep going in the same pattern every single day, following the same structure, following the same, let's say, workout plan or meal plan or whatever it is. Then you fall into this internal confusion, and then external confusion through your habits.
That's a great point though. Like actually, because my wife deals with that like anxiety and anxiousness around her period, and again, like eating clean, right? Like and eating
Yeah.
like a high protein leverage diet. And now I'm gonna be like, actually, how's your carb intake these last couple, like the
Mm.
week leading up to it?
And everyone's
And
carb phobic nowadays, so it's
she's
so
definitely not,
hard.
but
It's so hard
yeah,
to give
yeah,
yourself. Okay, great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
but
but I
but
think.
but yeah, like you're saying,
Sorry.
people are carb phobic. Not saying that she is, but other people. And then, I mean, like my again, like that. Okay, so since we're on the topic of the period and the cycle altogether, right? Like, it kind of makes me wonder. Okay, like what are things that you do, and then like what are things that you do like with people you're working with to
Yeah.
help with like that regulation? Obviously, like you're talking about this arc right now where you lost it. Sounds like it's a case of amenorrhea due to lack of body fat,
Totally.
realistically, right? And then
Totally.
you're like,
Yep.
okay, like like you said, the hormones being there from the birth control. What hormone actually isn't? Is it? It's not estradiol that's in
It's
the actual.
progesterone, right?
It's progesterone, right? It's progesterone primarily
It
for a.
depends. I think it's. I'd actually have to double check this.
Yeah,
I was just rereading about it, but it's. I think it depends on the pill. It usually depends on the pill.
yeah. Some of them I think have some
More or less.
estradiol worked in there with it.
Yeah.
It depends. Yeah, it does. And but like nonetheless, too, like that was the. I mean, funny story, right? Like first thing that the God almighty, the OBGYN asked my wife, "Is like, all right, so like let's talk about birth control." And she's like, "Are you ready to like get on a pill now that you've had your second kid?" And she's like, "No, I'm not doing that shit." Like points to me, is like, that guy over there is getting a vasectomy. And I was like, yeah, that was what we agreed upon. So
Wow.
you birthed two kids, so I can go get my testicles cut. So it's
Wow.
okay.
It'll mess her up, dude. It'll mess her up. I mean, I know post kids. I mean, I with a lot of clients, like do you always get this, Marcos? Maybe you get part two. It's like post kids with a client, they're like, I'm just not the same. Just not the same. Especially if they have like diastasis recti, right? Pelvic floor
Hmm.
issues. If
Yeah.
they get a
Yeah.
cesarean, I mean that stuff destroys, and then their gut microbiome for a long time is messed up, and then it's
Yeah.
like they're just
Yeah.
not the same.
Well,
They're just not the same.
not to mention too, after pregnancies that are CBAC, you know what I mean? Like, so like, yeah, or like those type of children, I think I'm saying it right, or yeah, right, where it's a natural born after having a cesarean, like that has like different implications of like how things work because the muscles were cut initially. Like there's so many like little nuances to child rearing, which a female body is meant to do, that
And it's not talked about like until you're getting pregnant. I feel like women know nothing about pregnancy unless you really go out of your way to learn about it. It's not something that's just common conversation.
Mhm.
Speaking on these sort of like physical issues that happen, yeah, like I had a woman that I worked with who she ended up having to get a C-section, and her abdominal wall was actually like put in the wrong place
Oh shit.
for a long time. And they didn't realize the whole time until she had her second baby that the doctor, because they didn't get the original doctor during that time, he was like on leave, and then her OG doctor was like, I would have never done that to you. I'm
Oh my
so
God.
sorry.
a case of
Oh my God.
dumb. A case of that's
Yeah.
kind of wild. That's I mean
Yeah.
that kind of comes to show, ladies, guys, couples, if you're having a kid and you're about to have a C-section, if that's the thing, right, emergency or not, make sure you got a good doctor. Do your research.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, childbirth, obviously, like, there's a lot of components to it. Again, even that I didn't consider. Obviously, like number two versus number one, vastly different kind of physiological responses, right? And then like body recovery for my wife, and body differences, and you can even see it in the two shots of pregnancy of like, again, like the body kind of keeps a score, right? In the sense that like the first time at 36 weeks versus the second time, wife was way bigger, holding the baby in a way different position, because the analogy that people like to use is like the balloons. Like once it's been stretched to its elastic capacity once, the second time it looks completely different, and where it sits is different. And that's kind of probably where the wives' tales come into place. Oh, they're sitting low, it must be a girl, or you know what I mean? Like all those different things. But I do want to go back to that question about like the cycle and regulating that, kind of what you did and what you do with people. So
Yeah, totally. So what ended up happening with me is that after a couple years, I finally got it. And I did learn along the way that I was a little bit iron deficient. So I didn't have terrible anemia, but I was there where I could be diagnosed as being anemic. Definitely had a lot to do with my diet. So I started supplementing iron for a bit, and I think that really helped things. Like I felt like it really helped things. I actually didn't stop being plant-based for a while. So I still got it while I was plant-based, and I was plant-based, just throwing it out there, like for moral, ethical reasons, spiritual reasons. Like as soon as I became a yoga instructor, I went fully vegan. So that wasn't really something that it was just like easy to throw away, and I didn't really fully connect it to that being the issue anyway, because I couldn't see myself eating animal protein for that time. And ironically enough, I think it had two things. There are two reasons why I got it back. One, I gained a little bit of weight. So that year that I got it back, that was 2019. In the beginning of the year, I started working with a trainer. Ironically, maybe I should have stopped training, but I didn't feel like I needed to stop training. I really needed to gain weight. And so I went on a program to essentially gain muscle, gain weight. I felt like I was skinny. And so I think I gained at least 4 or 5 pounds, maybe a little bit more. And that summer I got my period back. But the other thing is that I was in a 4-year relationship at the time. And ironically enough, as soon as I broke up with that guy, I got my period back.
I was going to ask.
You were stressed to the gills because of your relationship.
No,
no.
I will just clarify, like, he was great, he is great. Like, we didn't have a bad relationship. I think we just, like,
No, your biology knew it, though. Your physiology.
My biology knew, like, we weren't supposed to have babies together. So I really genuinely think that had something to do with it, because it was, like, immediate. Like, we broke up, and I, like, got my period, which is so wild.
No, obviously there's like 1,000 things you were like also doing on top of that. But I was gonna ask, like, I was gonna ask, like, just curious, not really like trying to, but like for women on like listening to this like that, and like to bring in the relationship and all that, like, how was your sex drive? How was that affecting the relationship? And then how was that affecting you mentally? Because obviously sex drive, it ties, I mean, those hormones tie into like just your general well-being.
Totally.
Like, how did that affect that whole thing?
I mean, it was super low for like a long time, and I thought it was because I didn't have my period and I maybe had hormone issues going on. Like, I didn't take just as a side note, like, I didn't take my period being gone seriously, at least like 8 months to a year after having it lost. At first, I genuinely was like, this is so cool. Like, I don't have my period. My friends have to deal with cramps, and I don't have to, and I don't even have to worry about it. And I obviously had no concept of the feminine body and being embodied as a woman. And then later on, I was like, oh, I should probably get this fixed, because my mom kept asking me to do pregnancy tests every month, even though like I knew I wasn't. And that was just super stressful and super annoying. So that's
Yeah.
like, I know that a lot of women listening to this will understand that. Like having to take a pregnancy test just because you don't know, or because you've lost your period and it's not coming back, or even because you have your period and you just don't really understand where you are in your cycle, which is like one of the number one things that I teach people. Just understanding how to track these really basic things so that you can have peace of mind whether you're trying to get pregnant or not trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I didn't take it seriously for a while, then I did, and I started to, make a lot of correlations. So just to answer your question, like I definitely had a super low sex drive, and I thought it was because of that, and then I realized I think it was because of my relationship. Because I mean, I'll just say, like, as soon as I got out of that, like it was fine. It was fine. So
No,
yeah.
it was as soon as you met Andres. I mean, he's a beautiful man. We get it.
Well, actually, yes. Actually, 100%. I met Andres. Full transparency, like it's been years. As soon as that relationship ended, which was a beautiful time, and I look back at it with a lot of grace and like so much gratitude, but I was not trying to get in a relationship for a long time. I fully just didn't want to be in a relationship. Andres knows this too, and he came along like this, and it like the rest is history. So in that I will say it wasn't the hormones that put my sex drive low.
And Andres knows his physiology. That's why he's just that good. He's just that good. No,
he's a great guy all around.
I wanted to ask though, like, so okay, you figured that out for yourself. Obviously, the relationship was a key factor. That hey, I'm figuring out my cycle now. All this stuff. Yeah. I'm not dealing with the things that women were dealing with, but now you're teaching women. Okay, this is how you deal with it. Then, okay, what do you tell women? Like, I know I've worked with women about cycle tracking. Working with women like, hey, when we're doing a follicular phase, this is not when we're doing cutting stuff. We don't want to do, because obviously there's laxity in the cells. We don't want to do sprint work and get an ACL. I've seen too many of those, like looking at young females and like, in the college. So it's like, how do you manage like nutrition deep, generically through cycles, and then obviously maybe some nuances with nutrition and training and movement recovery with cycle tracking? I know that's a loaded question, like just kind of a general overview.
I'll say that it's pretty individual, right? And like I'll definitely say that a lot throughout the podcast, because it really does depend on the woman and where she's at and how she's training. If she comes in and she's like training a lot, I don't always just adapt it to that. Like sometimes we need to look at the nervous system and be like, maybe you shouldn't be training so much. Maybe you need to focus a little bit more on nutrition and also a little bit more on your nervous system. Or maybe she's in a place where she's chill, she's good. We can implement more exercise. Maybe she comes from a place of not having exercised at all and wants to learn about that. At a baseline, I would definitely say like there's different ways that we can focus on different macronutrients throughout the cycle. So as I had mentioned, that week before your cycle, you definitely want to up your carbohydrates. Not drastically, right? Like there's a reason that women crave carbohydrates more in the week before their cycle. A lot of that comes in forms of cravings, which is for sweet things. And the reason we're craving sweet things is because it's such an easily accessible form of carbohydrates, right? So a lot of the time, women, and I'm not going to say every woman, but a lot of women maybe will restrict that because it's like, I don't want to gain weight, or I'm craving this thing, but I shouldn't have it. Your cravings are your body telling you something. So if you're craving something sweet, or you're craving something salty, or you're craving a certain type of food, maybe there's something in that food that your body's needing. Which is one of the coolest things that I ever learned about nutrition when I first got into this whole field. And so that means that's a time for you to intentionally start upping your carbohydrates, and you notice that your cravings really go down a lot, which is cool because you're giving your body what it needs. There's of course certain nutrients that we need during different parts of the cycle. So I always like to teach women why they crave dark chocolate the week before their cycle. It's usually because we need magnesium. Exactly. That's like well-known fact now. Everyone needs magnesium.
I guess I might need a lot of. I guess I need a lot of magnesium because I eat like 2 chocolate bars a day. I eat 2 chocolate bars a day.
Everyone needs chocolate. So during menstruation, it's kind of the opposite. So if a woman wanted to play around with a little bit like lesser of carbohydrate during that time, she can, because we're much more fat adapted during that cycle, or during that phase, because the hormones are so low. So we really just don't need so many carbs. If anything, a really good analogy that I think you guys will really appreciate is if you look at that second week of the luteal phase, which is basically the week before menstruation. It's kind of like carb loading, right? It's upping your glycogen stores, and then you get into your period and you really just don't need it, right? So that's a really great time also for adding in warmer foods. That's a little bit more from, I think, the Chinese perspective that I like to put in. I love Chinese medicine. I'm not an expert, but if we're just thinking of the system, like we need flow. We literally need our blood vessels to dilate and open up and let that blood flow go. So I like to add in a lot more nutrient-dense foods, warming foods and spices during the menstrual phase. When you move into the second part of the follicular phase, which we also just call the follicular phase, if we're looking at this in 4 different phases, we can start adding in definitely more protein, more fibrous vegetables, because estrogen is rising, right? So really, if we look at the cycle, we have, just to make things clear, I don't want to be all over the place. Like we have menstruation, then you have the follicular phase, then you have ovulation, and then you have your luteal phase, which is the whole second half of the cycle. So in the menstrual phase, your hormones are super low. You can be more fat adapted. You get into the follicular phase, estrogen is rising. Estrogen is the main key hormone at play during the first half of the cycle, and estrogen has its pros and cons. A lot of people demonize it, but like estrogen is fantastic.
You need it.
Also, fun fact: there's more testosterone than estrogen in the body, in the female body. Yes.
In terms of nanograms per deciliter.
Uh-huh.
In terms of nanograms per deciliter.
I think that is what it is. But it's, we'll talk about estrogen dominance, or a lot of people talk about estrogen dominance and all of these things, and we create this idea that there's so much estrogen overloading our bodies, but we really have just a small percentage. It's really about its relation to progesterone, which is the second hormone that's at play in that second part of the cycle. But anyway, that starts to rise after menstruation. And it's doing a lot of great things in the body. It's literally building your uterine wall. It's basically growth hormone. Like estrogen is the growth hormone. It's plumping your skin. It's plumping your lips. It's making you look really beautiful around ovulation, which makes sense because you're becoming super fertile during that time. Right?
I tell my girl she needs at least 10 guys to hit on her on that time. I need at least rookie numbers. We need a 10x that.
Andrés and I have this running joke where it's not even a joke, like he really does mean it, but he'll be like, "Are you ovulating right now?" And that's basically a way of saying like you look great.
You're shining, yeah.
He's like, I mean, he's always right, to be honest, but he'll literally, like, he knows. You can literally tell in a woman, like, if you're with her enough, you can tell the difference. There's just a certain glow, man, that happens. We're juicy during that time. And so,
literally, anyway, my wife, like this morning, I'm like, there's just like this aura about you. And I know because like I'm probably more in tune with understanding like where she's at in her cycle than she is. And then sure enough, there's also like differences of like physical touch or a few other things that are like a little bit keyed in on 100%. In our relationship that she does that is a kind of abnormal for her normal personality type. So I'm like,
so interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, I think, for a woman to explore her own behavior when she's ovulating and be like, whoa, like I see a difference.
Try living with them.
I'm not like that the rest of them.
Oh yeah, I think running joke like a month ago was like, if Rachel wasn't here, our producer / assistant at the house, like probably would have got some today. I was like really feeling it, and I was like, fuck, I knew it. I fucking knew it.
I knew it, dude. I think Rachel mentioned something too. I know she mentioned something too, like, hey, you could just give me like a look or a sign. I'll dip out, and I was like dying. I was like, I was with Marcos, and we were having some wine. We don't typically have wine, and I was like, I could Uber home right now, bro. Like
he's like, I'll go stay. Yeah, Seamus was out in Vegas this last weekend, and we went out to this dinner. And he's like, "I'll go stay at your parents' house and Uber home, man. Like, just let me know." I was like, "Bro, we still have to deal with my 2 kids. Like, trust me. Like, it wasn't happening tonight, regardless of you leaving. Guarantee you that."
Oh my god, so that's hilarious. Yeah, so you know full and well that there's an obvious difference.
Oh yeah. The more
that
you're with
the
longer
difference.
you're with a relationship, you for sure as a guy can pick up on those subtle differences visually, attention wise, like what they're looking for out of you as like a man. And it's, I mean, it's picking up on those things. Sometimes it's like, if you're like full work mode all the time, you can easily kind of push that to the side, but like trying to be more open to that. Like, again, like you talked about men maybe not knowing as much or talking about this topic a whole lot. And again, mainly because like we don't go through a cycle. We don't go through these different changes of dominating hormones as women do. We're generally an easier system to fix, and I kind of look at us like the worker ants. You know what I mean? Like or bees, right? Like there's a queen bee. There's one. I mean, like men are useless. Is what I tell my wife. She's like, oh, don't say that. It's like, no, literally, like you need us for like one thing, like, and the rest of it is like you can kind of care less.
Oh my god.
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. That's so funny. Well, I know we were talking about like the nutrition and like some general things.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask because you kind of hit something, and I really like was like, can you talk about this more? The CNS, the central nervous system. How are you quantifying that? How are you like talking about that, or how are you finding a baseline for that? Because like I know the listener here are women that are like, well, how do you figure out the nervous system? Like, how does someone do that?
Yeah, so I'll say two things on that. Just so everyone knows, there actually is, and there's science behind this, right? There's studies that have been done on this. It's fact that in the first half of the cycle, the woman's nervous system at baseline is in a more parasympathetic state. And then as soon as ovulation occurs, it switches into a more sympathetic state. So that basically means we're a little bit more chill at a baseline during the first half of the cycle, and then as soon as you ovulate and you get into the luteal phase, stress tolerance just goes down a little bit. And that can look different for different women, I think, depending on allostatic load, right? So like where their actual baseline of the nervous system is, and how they've recovered from, I mean, so many things, right? Like so many things that have happened in their life. Are they stressed all the time? Are they pretty chill all the time? One woman's sympathetic state in her luteal phase will look a lot different than another woman's.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to just CNS as a whole, quantification can come from, if I'm working with someone with, let's say, an aura ring, like we can look at their biometrics, we can see how their HRV is during the month, how things are fluctuating, how the recovery is. So are you recovering well from exercise? Are you really dipping low, and do you need a lot of recovery after a few days from just one exercise session? But to be honest, I really like to look at things from an intuitive lens. So I do work with clients where we work on biometrics, but truthfully, like I can just hear it in your voice. So if we're talking and you're just frazzled like this, and everything's stressing you out, and you're talking really really fast, there's cues when you know somebody is at a baseline nervous system,
A little more
like
simple, a
at a
little more
baseline
baseline.
like higher stressed
Yeah.
Yeah,
nervous system,
yeah.
and a lot of that comes from the yoga background. I would consider myself very intuitive with people. I definitely feel energies a lot, like pros and cons to that 100%. But we just know, and talking in conversation with people, and of course having a background and understanding the human body, just having a conversation with someone, you can kind of tell if they need work on the nervous system. If they need to
Yeah.
scale back more, or if they can't allow themselves to go a little bit harder. And it really just depends. We live in a very go 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 world, and you brought up a really good point, which is that men work on a 24-hour cycle, and that's the given. You guys kind of restart every single day, and most of the world functions like that. Like most of the world functions on the 24-hour clock, the circadian rhythm. We keep our routines on a daily basis, and we keep that day in and day out. But women do not work on just a circadian rhythm. We work on an infradian rhythm. So anywhere from that 26-ish to 35-ish day cycle, it fluctuates for every woman. It changes depending on what happened to you that month. It's constantly ebbing and flowing, and there are ways to track it throughout that so you can understand, but that's not baseline knowledge.
What kind of rhythm
So
was it before?
infradian.
Infradian. I thought you were going to
What
say
is the?
the other. What is diurnal rhythm? Why was I thinking
You
diurnal?
guys
That's
haven't heard of
diurnal.
circadian
That's the cortisol, right? So cortisol comes up,
Yeah.
comes down,
Yeah.
kind of that trough between like 1 and 3 for most people. That's where I take my nap. So I'm on a 12-hour time frame. I'll do like 12 hours. I just took one before, but like, yeah, obviously a lot of folks probably might know a little bit about the circadian, obviously 24 cycle, go to sleep, do your thing. The
Yeah.
infradian rhythm, can you kind of can you go over that just a little bit more? You're saying
Yeah,
like 35-day cycle. What's going on there?
So okay, so let me clarify. So yeah, the circadian rhythm is basically the sleep-wake cycle. It's the basic cycle that everyone has. It's cortisol rising and falling in the morning and kind of shifting throughout the day. It's melatonin increasing at night to make you fall asleep. It's the everyday cycle. The infradian rhythm is specific to women. So the infradian rhythm is literally the female hormonal cycle. It's the female rhythm. It's that usually textbook is 28 days. So just like circadian is 24 hours or 1 day.
And to clarify too, Parker, that's bleed to bleed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Really great question, actually. So basically from the first day of a bleed to the first day of your next bleed would be a full cycle. So let's say I bleed, I bled, I don't know, on day 1 of the month. And then on 29 days later, I bleed. That was a 28-day cycle. Because from days 1 to 28, I was in that one cycle. And then on that 29th day, I bled again. And so that makes day 1 of that cycle.
So it's bleed to bleed. This is always confusing, I think, even for women and men, is like, what constitutes the shifting into the next phase from menstruation to follicular, right? And I'm always confused by that too, because it's like, again, like there could be like, is it like spotting? Or, again, like, so like the tracking of that, I think is really appropriate for people to understand. Is like, hey, day 1 is this, and then the next time that happens again after it's cleared up is day 1 again, right? Like, or, you know,
I actually love that you're asking this question, because my friend was texting me today and she was like, just, I got my period because we were talking about it. And then I was like, okay, so that means you had a 26-day cycle. And she was like, wait, no, but my period lasted 6 days, so wasn't it only a 20-day cycle? And I was like, no, it doesn't. It's not from the day your period stops to when you get it again. It's from the day of a full bleed to that next day of a full bleed. And spotting doesn't really count. So it's really from full bleed. So you might like some women spot like 1 or 2 days before their period, and it's just basically your period is when you have to wear something. That's how you would quantify it. If you can literally just wear underwear and like it's not going to be an issue because there's just like nothing, it's tiny spotting, then that's not your period. That's kind of just like the start of it. And then once you have to actually wear something like a pad or a tampon or a cup or whatever, that's considered. That's a really great question.
Yeah, and I think
that makes a lot of sense too.
In reading like the period repair manual, it's like you can actually like measure the size of your bleed and then also get good that we'll call it objective data based on like how good your cycle is. And some people like, again, know whether or not they're light, medium, or heavy type of bleeds and what's normal for them based off of the volume of blood that is excreted through the shedding of that lining, right? So I found it fascinating because it's like, oh yeah, like I've never experienced that, but like I always got confused. I'm like, well, when does this phase start? So thank you for clarifying that, because
so exactly when when that bleed stops is basically when you'd move into the next phase, or at least you can say my period is over. And then if you're following things like cycle syncing, then you can move on to those different sets of guidelines, which I'll just make as a side note. Cycle syncing is actually what got me into this whole world. I think it's such a cool concept. It really teaches you about your hormones. And I was listening to a podcast one day when I was trying to get my period. So just so you guys know, when I got my period, when I got my period back, it was super irregular for a really long time. So I still had a lot of issues with it. And then I learned about cycle syncing through a random podcast I was listening to, and it blew my mind. I mean, literally, crazy story, believe it or not. I was riding bike and I was listening to this podcast on cycle syncing, a concept that I just did not know anything about. I had no idea that there were different phases in the cycle. I only thought of my period as my period. I was
cycle syncing while cycling. Cycle syncing while cycling.
Yes.
That's the story.
The cycle syncing includes seed cycling. Sorry.
We'll talk about seed cycling. We
Okay.
can talk about seed cycling.
Okay.
I love seed cycling, actually. But basically, I'm like riding my bike and I'm listening to this whole concept and my mind is being blown and I'm just like noticing the flowers on the trees and I'm like, life is so beautiful and feminine and oh my God, like this is so cool. And I got home and I got my period.
You needed,
And it was
you
like
needed
day
to, it's,
60.
I think you needed
Yeah.
to, honestly, it sounded like you needed to like have a chill out euphoric moment. Like you needed to lower your like allostatic load, I
Probably.
guess, like your
Your allostatic
stress.
load, to go back to the word that she
Yeah.
used. I knew you had to do
Yeah, exactly. Boom. I
I
wanted to ask.
remember that I was a woman. Like,
I'm a
yeah.
woman. I love that. And like, oh,
Yeah,
the
it's like
flowers,
I
the
am a
feminine
woman.
energy the feminine energy just started like radiating through you, which is, well, I'm glad that like,
Exactly.
you're finding that regularity. I mean, I hope someone can, if someone's dealing with that, obviously, like they can take that mindset. I do want to ask though, because we'll talk about seed cycling here in a second too. I wanted to ask like mindfulness, central nervous system, like all this stuff, like what do you, I know depth into the period and all this stuff, but what do you teach people then around these cycles and things like that with the CNS and everything? Like, I know you're a stress, you have like education and stress response and stuff like that. So what are some practices or the individualization you try to do with people on stress? Not like, hey, we're racking down their training, we're recovering more, we're eating now. What are some stress mitigation techniques that you might utilize?
Yeah, so I would say it comes in the form of both mindset and also practices. So a lot of the times people just need to change their mindset around things. I'd say that's like number one. So what are you actually
Mm-hmm.
stressed about? Why are we stressed about that? Like, why is this
Ooh.
stressing you out so much? And really talking to them about it. Like, what's going on there and why is this constantly affecting you? Like, maybe it's not what you think, or how can we reframe this? And that brings so much peace for people, like 100%. But also coming from my background of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I think is what you're referring to, and yoga. One of the most wonderful things I've ever come across, and I'm so glad that I've found it for my life and been able to implement it for other people, is breath work. So, I mean, that's like the ultimate mind clear. It's actually so cushioning for the nervous system. Don't know if you guys have tried it out or practiced it,
We
but
had
like,
a specialist on and gave us the
oh,
whole rundown and gambit
fantastic.
of it. Of course
Yeah,
we did.
Fantastic.
he made my hands go like this, like I did that whole thing, laughed, cried, and
Oh, okay.
felt felt the weight of the world lift.
Yeah, it's something crazy that happens. I mean, for me, it really changed my life. Like I used to deal with a lot of anxiety. This is like a whole other part of my health story, but probably not something to get into now, but I was dealing with a lot of gut issues around the start of the pandemic, and for a couple of years that really affected my nervous system, honestly, because the gut brain connection really is so strong. And I mean, I was just not myself. Like, I dealt with debilitating anxiety. You would not know it just by looking at me now. And whenever I tell people, they're like, what? You? But yeah, that was happening. And when I found breath work, it was like my entire world shifted. It was the first time that I finally felt this true sense of peace in so long, just because I found this practice to regulate the system. I love meditation. And I think if someone wants to get into meditation, that's great, but I don't think it's for everyone. I think somebody has to want to do that. And I think that
Agreed.
there's different forms of meditation for different types of people, and that's of course the individual thing, right? Like, we talk and we figure out what's meditative for you. Is it cooking? Is it gardening? Is it just being outside?
Yeah.
Is it going for a walk? Is it getting sun? Like, as long as you can disconnect the mind for a second and just be present, like, that is meditating.
Oh
Yeah,
You
that
don't have
makes
to just
sense.
sit down on a cushion and be bored, because it's not going to work out for everyone.
I
No.
like that a lot. I think that makes sense because I think when you come from like an extreme practice, wherever you're at, like, oh, meditation's the answer. It's like, or we've had these diet wars over the last 10 years. Carnivore's the answer. CrossFit's the answer. It's like, no, it comes down to the individual of like what they want to do.
Totally, totally.
And we all have to breathe. We all have to breathe.
You all have to breathe, and it's the first thing to go when we're stressed. So once you think a stressful thought, or you're just once you're out of that natural, divine, beautiful state that we all are meant to be in and we all have within us, the first thing we do is we hold our breath or it's shallow, or you can't even really feel that you're fully breathing. And once you bring in that mindful aspect of, or even just the mindful awareness of, okay, how's my breath? And you can bring that back. It's like reversing the process. So if you get stressed and you lose your breath, okay, bring back the breath and reduce the stress. Right? You're just going in the opposite direction. And I would say that's probably the number one thing that I teach people.
Well,
we don't do crazy sessions either, right? Like there's so many
you don't.
tiny practices you could do in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're doing great.
Yeah, I feel like,
which one's your favorite method?
Yeah.
I love 4-7-8 breathing. That's like the number one that I like to teach people. Usually I start with box breathing for people just because it's so easy to remember and do, and like in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And it's really beneficial. Like the Navy SEALs use that. It's really great. 4-7-8 is like what I personally use in so many random instances.
Can you explain that one? Can you explain that one?
Okay, yeah, sure. If you're listening right now, everybody can do it.
Just don't do it driving.
I would say even if you're driving, just don't close your eyes. Just don't close your eyes.
Oh, okay.
I do it while I'm driving, to be honest. Sometimes traffic can be really stressful if you're like late.
Oh, if you're in LA, I'm gonna need this. I'm gonna have to write this down, guys.
Yeah, I was in LA a couple weeks ago, so I also, it's a lot. It's a lot to be on the road. Just in general, there's a lot of stimulation on the road. So listen, 4-7-8, it's a 3-part breath. And so basically what's happening is you would breathe in for 4, you would hold for 7, and then you breathe out of your mouth for 8. And you're doing it in through the nose and out through the mouth. So everybody just take a deep breath. Let it out through the mouth. Relax the shoulders, relax the jaw. Don't close your eyes if you're driving. Okay? Just feel yourself kind of settle in for a second, all right? Relax your eyebrows, relax your cheekbones, relax your jaw. We're going to breathe in the nose. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Out the mouth. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do it one more time. In the nose. Hold. Out the mouth. That's it.
Refreshing.
Chill.
Chill.
Just chill.
Super.
Just
chill.
little 30-second meditation session for all of us.
I usually do it at least 3 times, but I know we're on a podcast. So as a general rule of thumb, when you exhale longer than your inhale, it brings your body into a parasympathetic state. So even if you're not, I'd say if you're really, really, really stressed, like if you're like blood pressure is high, like you're in an anxious situation, I wouldn't really recommend holding your breath for so long. But maybe breathing in for 4 and out for 8, in for 4, out for 8. I'm just doing it like that.
I love that one. For me being like a trainer on the floor for many years, you're kind of bipolar. I mean, you probably knew it, like dealing with energy people in the yoga, like you're kind of doing like edutainment, entertainment, right? You're like, hey, I got to get these people in the right in the right positions, but how do I say it in the right way? All right, guys, you're gonna do cat cow. Now, no twerking. Obviously, you get them in the right positions, but then also at the same time, it's like that hour ends and you just dealt with that hour. One of the practices that I had to do was just like I put my hand on the belly and I just start doing like the box or just deeper breath work. One of my favorites too is like, I think for me, and this is just for y'all that are listening, is like I do the gut smashing at night. I know you mentioned the gut and mind connection, but that right there, like 5 minutes on a softball or like a basketball, and I just lay on it and I just massage the gut. I get like a big serotonin hit. Oh, try it out tonight. I get like a big serotonin hit.
What is this, just like rolling on the stomach? I've done this with a foam roller, like just randomly, but I didn't know that I didn't know this was like concept.
So the foam roller is cool. Idea. Oh yeah, it was. Kelly Starrett definitely showed it. Like I think it was like the video was like I did it
10 years ago.
As soon as
that's when we started with the gut smashing. It was mainly for like an IT band, or not IT. SOAS.
It was for the IT band, SOAS release, SOAS release and stuff. But I was like, no, I like it up here in the abs a little bit more, and And he goes, he mentioned it like kind of passerby. He was kind of like, if you're trying to go to sleep, this is a good one to do. And I was like, all right, cool. So I got a softball. I don't have it right here, but it's big enough to get in there. A basketball might be too big, or like a deflated soccer ball is cool if you have one of those. And I just started doing it, and I remember I would do it for like 3-5 minutes, and I would just look at the clock, and I'm like, I need to pass out, and then I just go to sleep. I go to sleep. I
Wow,
remember
that's
I rem- I
Ooh.
remember I had a client who um I love this client. I don't want to mention her name, but she was a client for like 2-3 years. I was training her, and she always had anxiety. Late, she's like, I slept in, something was wrong last night. And then I was like, oh, cool. And I was like, well, what makes you like, what's going on with the sleep? Like, let's talk about that for a second. And she's like this. I'm like, I just mentioned it to her, and she's like, Seamus, that was the first night that I slept like a baby in like 4 years.
Mm.
oh my god, I just got goosebumps. Wow.
Feeling it. I'm stealing it for a client that asked me
Yeah.
about some things
Well, look,
for
so
sleep.
that's
Yeah.
that's a really important note, which is a lot of the times people need physical unwinding, right? So going back to the nervous system question, like yes, breath work is an immediate thing, and if all the counting and ratios sounds like too much, like literally as you said, like just putting your hand on your belly and just bringing yourself to bring awareness to the breath, so powerful. Like just breathe in and out, just breathe in and sigh out. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, right, like just like you said earlier, Marcos, like body keeps the score. So if we can stretch our hips, which is where so much tension is stored in the body, like so much emotional tension is stored in the hips. It's absolutely wild. If you're stressed and you do a hip stretch, like do a pigeon pose, just watch how things change. Wild. Absolutely wild. Stretching the psoas and stretching, the outer hips, those glute muscles, is game changing.
Oh, I've gotten away from that practice going like 7 years ago. Damn it. And it was so good. I remember when like, just like Seamus, like that seems more actionable with my life right now is like 3 to 5 minutes on something before bed. Cause I used to sit down and do ROMWOD before they turned into pliability as like my nighttime wind down session. And I mean, I literally like had no issues. Like I didn't even have to warm up for any lift. I could just go like out like straight cold into like full depth squats. And now it's like, and it's a massive amount of warming up, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I definitely associate things to like what you just said. Like there is a lot of tension there. It's probably why a lot of people do also experience back pain, and it's like
Yeah.
giving your body a little more TLC is so hard.
Yeah.
And then also too, I wanted to share this story. That movement in college campus, damn it, I wish my phone saved that data because as we talked about before we started with our athlete 2.0 kind of people were trying to bring on board across the macro perspective journey. Um, that was one of the things that I really had no idea the implications it had on my health at the time in a very positive way. And I started paying attention to my steps later on in the career. But if I would have been able to look back at that particular, health data from the Apple Health, it was like right when it was around too. There was probably 15 to 20,000 steps daily just going on campus, going from class to class. And the only way I ever thought of getting a composition that was worthwhile was eating 4,500 calories a day. And I disregarded the fact I'm training for like about 4 hours a day on average and walking an insane amount.
Yeah.
And so like that, as soon as you mentioned, oh yeah, I was walking on campus, I'm just dealing with this like 104-pound frame. It immediately brought back like again, like a physique that I was like, I can keep this shit for forever. And then like now it's like at 30, I'm like, fuck, I missed those days where I had to walk on campus.
I actually had this conversation with Andres and a few other people recently where I felt like I've not been moving as much. Like I'll exercise, right? But it's like you exercise and then you're sitting down, you're on your laptop or like my iPad and you're just doing your things and you're forced to walk around so much if you're on a college campus.
Hmm.
Like it's just you're walking across to and from classes, workshops, library, whatever it is, and you're not even thinking about it. Whereas
Yeah.
that's just not the
It's
case when
it's
you
insane.
when you get out of
Freshman
school.
15 is the thing, right? Like if you
Yeah.
like if you're doing some resistance training, not to like the extremes that all of us probably did, and you're just walking from to all your classes, like it's probably actually really hard to gain
You're rucking
15.
too.
Yeah, you're rucking because you got to. Well, nowadays you just hold like a Kindle, and you have one thing on
Yeah.
your back. But back in the
Well, I
day, we had those
remember
textbooks,
back in the
bro.
day, I had the textbooks and I had the Mac or I had a laptop that it needed that air thing underneath it because it would just overheat. I
50
didn't have like a
pounds of
good
just a freaking
so
computer weight.
a computer, and then the textbooks, and then they're like, oh, by the way, these are on Kindle now. But I like don't like reading textbooks on Kindle.
Digital.
I needed it like physical, and I was like, nah. And I would be on campus from like freaking 5 to like 9 p.m., dude.
Yeah. Every
Yeah.
student is just rucking without trying on a college campus. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's college. This I just wanted to have that aside before I forgot it. But I do want to circle back to seed cycling for our last kind of like topic.
Here.
Ironically, I had some great success with female clients utilizing this when I didn't really know a hell of a lot about it. One of my mentors wrote up the program and protocol, and I was like, hey, this is a great way of maybe getting your hormones a little more intact because of maybe filling some of those micronutrient deficiencies that aren't there in this macro counting lens. So I want to know like your take and how you explain it to people and what it is, you know?
Yeah, totally. So seed cycling is a relatively simple concept to follow. So essentially what's happening is that, as we talked about, there's these like two main halves of the cycle. You have your menstruation and your follicular phase, which really can just be grouped as the follicular phase as a whole, and then you have your luteal phase. So if we're looking at a 28-day cycle, which I didn't totally mention earlier, I didn't expand on, rather, it's not everyone has
It
28
varies.
days. It's just textbook. Like if you don't have a 28-day cycle, like don't feel bad. Like I don't even have a 28-day cycle. Like for some people it's 30. It can go anywhere. I think
It's
from
like 31
really
plus or minus 4.
35 days. Sorry, what?
Yeah. It's like 31 plus or minus 4 on average. It's standard deviation based off of the numbers they did.
Yeah.
Like you said, they didn't have enough research on women's health, so they didn't really know.
Exactly. Like they just needed to put a number on it. But for seed cycling, it does follow a 28-day cycle, regardless of if your cycle is 28 days or not. So essentially what happens is from days 1 to 14, so for the first half of that cycle, you're eating 2 different types of seeds, and then for the second half of the cycle, you're eating 2 other types of seeds. So for the first half of the cycle, I always have to take a second to remember it, but I'm pretty sure
pumpkin and flax?
It's pumpkin. No, yes, it's pumpkin and flax seeds. Exactly, it's pumpkin and flax seeds.
I just had some of this guy's flaxseed pudding. Some of the best flaxseed pudding I've had with chia seeds.
It was chia seed pudding. It wasn't flax.
But there was some flax in it though, because I saw some other stuff.
That was steel cut oats. Sorry to. Oh,
gotcha.
No, that's great. I've done that before though with like chia and flax, but it can be kind of weird. So
yeah, chia's better.
Yeah. So anyway, so in the first half of the cycle, yes, you win a gold coin. It's pumpkin and flax seeds. And just like you said, there's certain micronutrients that are in each of those seeds that are really helping the cycle. We talked about how in the first half of the cycle, estrogen is that predominant hormone. And so each of these both help healthy estrogen production, but also healthy estrogen detoxification. So we know pumpkin seeds are really high in zinc. That's really, really good for that part of the cycle. I think especially because menstruation happens during that time, we can lose that through the blood. But also the fibers that are in each of these seeds really help to detox the estrogen from the body so that we come into those healthier levels to help with that second half of the cycle. Make sure that it's just not floating around there, which can then lead to issues with like PMS and other cycle issues. In the second half of the cycle, the 2 seeds that you're eating are sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. Really high in vitamin E. The sunflower seeds are super high in vitamin E. Each of them, again, have nutritional properties that then help out with progesterone, which is that predominant hormone in the second half of the cycle. And essentially, you're eating a tablespoon of each of those seeds every day. So in the first half of the cycle, it's a tablespoon of flax seeds and a tablespoon of pumpkin seeds. And then in the second half of the cycle, from day 15 to 28, you would be eating a tablespoon of sesame seeds and a tablespoon of sunflower seeds. So I've known about seed cycling for a really long time. I never followed it because it was just super inconvenient for me. Like I didn't want to get all the seeds. I knew I wouldn't follow through with it. Like I needed it to be more convenient. Even if I put it in pretty jars, I was just like, I don't want to scoop every day. Like it's annoying. So just so that people know, there actually is a company out there that I found, and it's the company that I finally used to get me to seed cycle.
Wait, is it the one that makes the cookies?
No, what? Are there seed cycling cookies?
There was a company like 8 years ago. I don't know if they exist anymore. Yeah, I know. What? Okay, anyway.
I'm going to have to make a recipe for that, but wow.
Please.
No, I didn't know. No, they're called BIA. I like recommending this to anyone that I'm working with or anyone asking about seed cycling, just because like I had always known about seed cycling and I didn't follow it because it was inconvenient to me. Some people will say it's so simple, right? But like whatever. So they basically sell these packs where it's like from day 1 to 14 you have this one bag and you just need to take a scoop out of it because it has
Yeah.
everything ground up already in there. It's organic, they're ground up, it's super easy to just put in whatever. I put it in my oatmeal, I put it in my smoothies. I'm gonna have to make cookies with it. And they're really really great just for anyone who like wants to go that route or just get all your own seeds and do it yourself. But crazy enough, the first month that I seed cycled, so I have a regular cycle, but it's a little bit more than 28 days. So it's usually like 31 to 32 days on average. And the first month that I seed cycled, I had a 28-day cycle, which I just thought was really cool. Like I had never had a 28-day cycle, especially coming from having longer cycles and irregular cycles. I just thought like maybe the 30-ish day was my average or my norm. But I had a 28-day cycle the first day that I did it, or the first month that I did it, and I recently restocked on that, and I'm back on that. So maybe another time we can talk about how it's still going. But I really love it, and I like didn't even know it was coming. So I don't have terrible PMS symptoms, but especially because this year came with a lot of travel, there was a lot of fluctuations and just sort of how every month affected me that week before my cycle, which is a really big consideration, just so that everyone knows like travel stressors throughout the month can really affect the cycle. And I just literally did not know it was coming. Like I thought I at least had another few days of it, and I got it, and I was like, I wouldn't have known. And it was such an easy breezy period too. So just I don't know. I love seed cycling.
Easy breezy.
I recommend
Love
trying it
it.
Easy
out.
breezy.
Yeah.
Love
I think
it.
the biggest thing
Great
for me too
insights.
was I can't find the company. I was trying to Google it. There was another.
It's BEEYA.
Oh yeah. No. I found that one. There's a company
Oh, the
that makes
cookie
the
company.
cookie company. It was like, just, hey, take one of these a day kind of thing. It's like it gives you like a month of the cookies or whatever. They have bars now. A different company, Nava Fresh. It looks like,
Oh yeah, I've
to
heard
make
of
your
them.
life even easier. But that back in the day, oh man, I really wish I remember the name of that company because it was the same thing. It was like, oh, this sounds great in theory, but like doing this seems really hard. So like you just mentioned, those prepackaged kits that have those things are huge, and we'll link that in the show
Yeah.
notes because
Yeah, we'll link
again,
that.
like things that can help assist the health, and like you just said, it's all of a tablespoon of each, meaning it's like what, 10 grams of fat at most. It's not going to throw off like your macro composition, or
Nothing.
you throw it into a
Nothing.
smoothie
No,
to start your day.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, right? Like it's food at the end of the day. Like it's not some crazy supplement. It's not something that you can't trust. So I would just if you're especially if you're trying to balance your hormones, if you're trying to fix your cycle in any way, if you're trying to help out any PMS symptoms, like it's super worth trying. It's going to be anywhere
Yeah.
from like 10 to 14 grams of fat, which like it's healthy fats.
Yeah. Throw it in
I think
throw it in your
it's
smoothie as your nut base, like, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
then you just rotate them, and like it's super simple. And the I remember too that the one note that I'll mention with the guy who wrote it for me, it was talking about sprouting them or getting them in a sprouted form sometimes, and that inconvenience as well was like another step to the process of like sprouting
yeah.
your own organic stuff. So
Yeah.
hopefully the one that you're recommending does have that, because apparently it opens up the bioavailability of it all. But I think even just starting
Yeah.
with just the plain Jane ones that are done for you kits, like you said, it's like what, $1, $1.50 a day to have like the pre-done packages. Like you just said,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's
Yeah. Not a bit.
convenience
Not
is
a,
It's really cool. I like
convenience is
that
king.
they're ground up. They're ground up already, so it's not like these whole seeds that you have to try to find like a way to incorporate in a different way. But also like you could if it is kind of a process to soak, but if you wanted, you could take a scoop like the night before you're gonna have it and just put that in water and kind of open it up that way to sprout them, so to say, and then
yeah.
especially
Oh,
if I like to make them in overnight oats and chia pudding, so in that sense you are opening up the bioavailability.
there it
Easy.
is. There it
Boom, there
is.
you go. So yeah, there's the hack with it too. It was, yeah, that concept is super, again, keen on that. And I'm definitely like, again, I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe anything when it comes to like women, but like I'm like, we should talk about these things cycle related and how is it really, and opening up their eyes. And you ask that in the questionnaire, and they give maybe a birth control or an IUD that does have some hormones related to it, and just bringing awareness to it. It's like, hey, like, what is the purpose? But they're like, oh, this is the only way I've been able to regulate my period. And I'm like, okay, so you're not on this because of birth control. You're on this on hormone control, which I think you could do when you're working with your food to actually
Yep.
Yep.
like use it as again like keeping a score. And that's what period repair manual was Dr. Laura Bryden talks about is like you want to use that your monthlies as a report card of like how good your body is doing, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
It is literally a report card every single month. Like the way that you bleed, the color, how much you bleed, as you mentioned earlier, like if it's too much or too little, that's also a thing. It literally tells you what's going on with your body every
Bing.
single month.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know we could have a whole discussion on like that thing as well. And no, I mean, I think we covered a lot of really cool things here about like just being more of an advocate, even as men, for women's health. Like,
Yeah.
again, I think I'm passionate about it in the sense that like, I want to make sure my wife lives an equally as healthy life as me. And I want to make sure that like she's understanding those things. And even you just mentioning, hey, like, since you're paying attention to her cycle, just tell her to eat some more carbs and see if that helps that. Like, cause she's been dealing with that. Like, so I don't know why, like, my anxiety is like higher, right? Like, what's something wrong with me? And it's like, oh, maybe not. Maybe it's just that you're the diet that you're normally doing. And she'll do what you kind of did and you mentioned in your story, just not eat throughout the day, basically intermittent fast to like right
Yeah,
now in the
that's
day,
horrible.
just by nature. Like so that's like she's just like not like she likes food, but she's not like me where she has to be eating so regularly. But that's
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
like let's find those healthy carbs. Let's make sure that these are being worked in, and see if she does feel better because she's
Yeah.
like, that thing of like something wrong with me. That question, I'm sure a lot of women feel that way. You
Well, yeah.
don't want that.
I
Right.
I digress there with or I kind of wholeheartedly agree there with Marcos. I feel like I want to get you in touch with my lady Desiree. She's a registered dietitian. Like she talks about all the same things you're talking about. Like she'll just be making like her Ninja Creamy, but then toss in some dark chocolate, and she'll be like, "Look, Seamus, I'm taking care of my nutrients because I'm ovulating or whatever." And I'm like,
I love that.
this conversation, I feel like you two would hopefully like get along and talk about this stuff because
Oh,
I
I'm
know
sure.
she's all about that, and I know you are as well. And I think it would be really cool conversation to see how that would mesh if she ever decides to break out of her freaking shell.
Can't force her.
Not yeah, I can't force her, but no, what I wanted to just do is I know we're kind of over an hour now, Parker, and I just want to be super respectful of your time for the audience. Like we really just want to say thank you here from the macro perspective. I think what you brought in was super dialed in, super nuanced, but also at the same time still just an hour overview. I think people still need to do their research on their own and kind of figure this out and maybe figure out with someone. So with that being said, where can people find you and how can they probably reach out?
Yeah, so my name is Parker Sloan. My Instagram, which is where I'm the most active, is the Rolling Sloan. Says a lot about my personality. I feel that's what it's at right now. And my website is theRollingSloan.com. That's basically the best place to find me. If you want to shoot me a quick message, you can do that through Instagram. If you want to email me, that's Parker at theRollingSloan.com. I also have that on my website though. There's a whole little forum thing that you can just fill that out. And that's that. Yeah.
Awesome.
All
Well,
right.
thank you again so much for the time, guys. Do me a favor, men and women, share this one. I think you'll get insights with your partner, maybe yourself. And if you guys are dealing with any specific issues, you might have to reach out to Parker. She'll definitely help you out. Other than that,
Here.
we'll see y'all on the next episode.